We have the honor of having Rahul Pandita, a journalist and author, and known for his reporting from conflict zones. His books include Hello Bastar, Our Moon Has Blood Clots, the lover boy of Bhavalpur, and The Absent State. His latest novel, Our Friends in Good Houses, marks his entry into fiction. He is a recipient of the International Red Cross Award for conflict reporting. He is a Yale World Fellow and a New Foundation Fellow. Along with Rahul Pandita, I have the honor of introducing you Umair Ahmed Khan, content specialist and radio jockey with All India Radio's FM Rainbow in Mumbai. He works across television, OTT platforms, theatre, brand communication, and is actively engaged in promoting Hindu, Urdu, and Persian literature. He also teaches media studies in Mumbai and has an MBA in HR from Mumbai University. The conversation will be moderated by Shashidhar Nanjundaiah, writer and media scholar. His recent book, New Aesthetics and Myth, examines media practices of visibility and absence in contemporary India. He is the founding dean and professor at the School of Digital Media and Communication, Mahindra University, Hyderabad. Over to you, Shashidhar.
Thank you so much for the kind introductions, and good afternoon, everybody. I have the honor of moderating this, what promises to be a very fascinating session. As was introduced, we are going to be really dealing with people from the media and their purpose, their writing, how that comes into authorship, and how identity and representation might take a very interesting turn when somebody who's been writing one way is writing another way now. So first of all, I think, so these are the books, by the way. This is The Value of Unfinished Songs by Umair, and Our Friends in Good Houses by Rahul, this is his latest but first fiction. It is the first fiction by Umair as well. So, because these books are so recent, one of the things that almost inevitably comes to mind is the context in which they are based. Both our authors today are either full or half Kashmiris, and there is a certain context of Kashmir in 2025 that comes to the mind of a normal reader like myself. When I'm reading these books, the first thing that came to my mind was what happened in 2025, especially in Kashmir. And I think early on in the year, we all know the traumatic Pahalgam incident, and what kind of traces that kind of trauma, which seems to be cyclic and repeated, would leave on authorship and writing, right? So there is that angle to it. It seems that publishing has become quite popular in India now, thanks to social media, and yet yesterday, I don't know if you all read Shobha Day's column in the Deccan Chronicle, where she was asking the question, where are all the radical thinkers? Where are all the thinkers who used to have very powerful ideas or very, strong opinions gone? Because literary festivals seem to be kind of evacuated out of them. And I don't think that is necessarily true to the extent that you can always find those traces. So, in that kind of context, I want to do two things. One is that I want to indulge both of you in the same kind of conversations, and then we'll kind of wedge off into the different directions of the texts themselves. So, let me begin with what goes on in the author's mind, right? Like a true teacher, I'm going to read from my text. Apart from an enduring experiential discourse of, of the diaspora, there's been an increased outpouring, really, of experiences and political narratives on Kashmir. So to write a fresh story, an engaging story that is different and yet seemingly or really experiential must be one of those challenges that an author faces. That's just in my mind. So to understand what goes on in the author's mind before you even start writing something would be, that's a fascinating question for me. If we can start with you, Rahul.
Thanks, Shashi. So as a conflict reporter, I've reported from Kashmir, which is also a place I belong to, and my own personal experiences in Kashmir has also resulted in a memoir which came out in 2013. It's a book called Our Moon Has Blood Clots. But after the book came out, and I faced a certain dilemma. The dilemma is that, from the publishing point of view, because the book did well, it suddenly became a USP of sorts, where after every 6 months, some publisher or the other would come to me and say, hey, do you want to do a quick book on Kashmir? How has Mr. Modi done in Kashmir, for example? What led to the abrogation of Article 370? What happened in Pulwama in the February of 2019? Now, I kept on telling them in my head, and to them also, is that, the fact that I'm a Kashmiri Pandit and someone who was exiled from Kashmir at the age of 14 is a very significant part of who I am, but that's not the only thing I am about. I have a lot of other concerns, universal concerns, which I want to think and write about. And I finally did that through this debut fiction, Our Friends in Good Houses, where I have tried to savor the idea of homelessness from an actual physical displacement. Now, as a journalist, of course, the kind of journalism I have done, Shashi, is, it has always stood at the cusp of writing and journalism, what the American author David Foster Wallace used to call being a non-journalist journalist. And I was fortunate enough, especially in my later years, to work with editors who had a very clear idea about long-form reporting and good writing, etc. But even then, when one went to conflict areas, to the ground, to places like Bastar and Assam and to Kashmir, and in many parts in the hinterland, I felt a certain inadequacy between what I was experiencing on the ground and what I was able to put in my journalistic dispatches. Now, I remember many, many years ago, a very popular TV editor, I was being interviewed for a job, and he asked me a question. He said, he must have looked at my rather faltering English, and he asked me, he said, do you think in Hindi or English? Now, I found this question really silly because I know what he meant, because, as journalists, once you enter into a field, you already started thinking in terms of language. You think, this is going to be your intro, this is going to be your ending, etc. But I've always tried to, as a writer journalist, I've always tried to escape that trap. I've always tried to think in terms of what the Germans call Dankbild, which is like a thought image. It's like a moving image. You enter and you record a certain scene in your head. And in these experiences, what happens is that there's always an additional layer of meaning, which despite your best efforts, journalism can never address. Many, many years ago, when I was young, I was working for a media organization, and I was taking a bus from this particular big bus stand to my office in Delhi. And this is a place called Nehru Place, which is quite popular in Delhi. And from my window, I saw this rather tall billboard, about 50, 60 feet high. And someone had actually climbed on that billboard and written a graffiti, self-graffiti in Hindi, with a little grease. And it read in Hindi, it said, "Sab kuch adhura reh gaya Pandey ji." Now, this sounds a certain despair, what we call hatasha in Hindi. Despite its best intentions, a journalist can go to Pandey ji and ask him what is wrong. But despite its best intentions, journalism can never address this despair itself. And that is where fiction comes into picture, and that is what I have tried to do in this particular book.
Right. Umair, if you can take the same question, essentially to find fresh stories in a plethora of stories around you, especially if a region is hyper-visibilized in the media, in generally, almost the expectation from somebody even who's a half Kashmiri like you would be expected to write about, I guess?
So, first of all, thank you for having me here, the organizers of HLF. Unlike Rahul sir, my identity with Kashmir is not an inherited one. It is what I call as an established one, with a few cousins and relatives living over there. Kashmir almost is, or I should say, is a second home to me, with what started as a vacation ritual in every summer and winter. Every time I went to Kashmir and every time when I came back to Bombay, it was purely based on the observation. I feel Kashmir will teach you philosophy even when you're not seeking it. So that is the magic of the place, I would want to say. And to write a historical fiction, so I remember once my grandfather telling me, history is always written by the one who's victorious. But then there's no one plain formula that defines the recording of history. And history always leaves you with certain gaps. And for someone who's observational, it becomes a compulsion on my end to fill in those gaps. How is it that you fill those gaps? I feel the void is to be filled with honesty. And this is all what I believe in, and this is my work. With all my observation, I think it's an honest book, and it is for the readers to read and give me an idea. But filling in those gaps with humanistic ideas and values, I think that is somebody, the best part of writing could fill in those gaps.
Thanks. I mean, the running thread between both of y'all's experiences is the word experience itself, where, so what you are calling honest, for example, or honest writing, what is honest writing? Is it experiential? Is that what defines honesty? Is it what is taking forward the untold stories, or invisibilized stories that a journalist cannot or will not, or I don't know, maybe it's doesn't find enough relevance to actually narrate. We all know who we are, so it's okay. How do you unpack that? Like, what is honesty to you, Umair?
The very crisp idea to it would be not to sentimentalize things or emotions. You have to be honest in your narration, but you shouldn't be sentimentalizing it. so that it doesn't create an uproar. Of course, the writing has to be honest. When you don't write with all your honesty, I don't think anything would accomplish. So the simple ingredient that I felt, and I also put that in my book, is never to sentimentalize anything. That's my answer to it.
Rahul?
I think one of the biggest problems we are facing in English fiction writing in India is somehow we're always worried about the Western gaze, which means that even before we start writing a novel, our attention is towards the awards, writing it in a particular way would do. I think that is very defeatist in purpose. So even before...
So that is dishonesty according to you?
That is dishonesty. Even before you write a book, if you have certain, if you have to just tick some boxes and include everything in that story, with the intention that, it will catch the attention of the Western audience and you'll get a Booker or any such award, then according to me it is dishonesty. I think the best writing, and you can also call it honest writing, is writing about moments of weakness or vulnerability from a position of strength.
It's a great word to unpack vulnerability, but we'll move on then to the texts that we want to talk about, because your protagonists both your protagonists actually are vulnerable in a lot of ways. They put themselves out there. They want to experience what, say, for example, conflict has to bring to their life, how they will deal with conflict, how they possibly grow or change or consolidate their own moral compasses, right? But before that, okay. Yeah, so so if we want to understand who, for example, Neil is, Rahul, should we ask you to read something from your book so that we understand who Neil is, or in some way set a kind of a context, get a flavor of your book?
So my novel is divided into 3 parts. It's the story of a conflict reporter called Neil, who has a very distinct idea of, it's a very physical, sharp idea of how and what a home should be. And in his head, it is always intertwined with the idea of love. But in the real world, this aesthetic sense of home and love always falls short of his expectations. So he's always struggling with it. And towards the end of the book does not end on an optimistic note, but ends on a rather accepting note, when Neil comes to terms with the idea of impermanence. So I have a couple of my favorite passages from the book. But since we are in Hyderabad, and one portion of the book also deals in many ways with Hyderabad, I was thinking that I should read from that particular passage.
In fact, when you write about that place, we know you've been to Hyderabad before.
So it's a very terrible time in the life of the protagonist, where he has lost the love of his life called Arani, and he withdraws from the world and goes to the mountains, where he starts living in isolation. And one day, while taking a trek with a couple of friends, they make him consume a little hash, a little drug, which makes him go into this trip, a phantasmagoria of sorts, like a delirium within delirium. And in this delirium, he is reminded of this Maoist commander who is from Hyderabad. Her name is Gurupriya, and he does not have a romantic relationship with Gurupriya, but it's someone, he is worried about her welfare. In the past, he has given her what the philosopher Simone Weil would call attention. You know, Simone Weil used to say that attention is the highest form of love. So, you know, the relationship is complex. There's a friendship involved, and he has not heard of Guru Priya in many, many months. Now, after consuming this little hash, he goes on a little trip, and that is what the passage will describe. What I've also tried to do in this novel is, because, you know, once you start reading, you have a certain ambition of becoming a writer. You have also benefited a lot from many trajectories you found in other books, right? You're reading a book written by Simone Weil, but suddenly, you know, she gives references of 5 other books. So in the vast ocean, you know, you find these little trajectories, and you go on to those trajectories and you find them extremely beautiful. So I thought, you know, I should also, for people who are interested, leave some of these clues and trajectories within the novel, so that, you know, I went to a bookstore in Mumbai. It's a small bookstore. And the owner of that bookstore, she said, you know, I read your book and I have ordered all the books mentioned in this particular book. So I was really happy about this. So I'm going to read this little passage where Neil has already consumed this drug, and this is what happens after he consumes this drug. He is a Neil. He stands and feels the trunk of the tree against his back. There's a consciousness that rises inside him, and every thought, every vision that comes to him comes in a beautiful distilled form. He slips himself down on the wet grass. The crow that he had heard cawing when he had hidden in the rose bed appears in front of him. Every sound around him has disintegrated, and each note comes to him, does a little trapeze act, and then passes on to make way for another note. The eunuch is saying Karina, and Arani's laughter washes over him. Guru Priya has emerged out of the bathroom with a towel around her hair. He's outside on the bed, half lying, fiddling with the worn-out strap of a wristwatch. He's waiting for her. He hears her humming a few lines like she had many years ago in the forest. And now it occurs to him, Kammani Prem. It's a song from a film called Guna. She walks towards the bed and looks at him. You sing well, he says. Nikupichi Patinda, she replies. In that forest, lying on that wet, grassy patch, her voice comes so clearly that he assigns a color to it. Amba. I'm mad, but so are you. What was that song you were humming? It is from this movie my friend took me to see once. It's about how a madman, she pauses, laughs, then continues. A madman like you falls in love with a woman he thinks is an avatar of a goddess, an angel. Sing it again. No, please. She looks at him, feigns anger, and hums it. Suddenly she disappears, and in the next vision, she is in DK. DK stands for Dandakaranya, the Maoist guerrilla zone. In her uniform, her fist raised in that revolutionary greeting. He's on a bike, and after a very bumpy ride, he enters a military camp in the deepest corner of the guerrilla zone in a place called Jagargunda. In a small hut in this camp, he finds a soldier lying on a wooden bench, delirious with malaria. The soldier gets up, then lies down again, gets up, then lies down again, gets up, then lies down again. As he gets up once more, his eyes fall on Neil. God knows what he is seeing. The soldier smiles and shouts, "Kuch lana to nahi hai." Neil suddenly becomes that soldier, and in the delirium, within a delirium, he sees Guru Priya enter with an AK-47. And he asks, "Kuch lana to nahi hai?"
Yeah, that's such an evocative passage you chose, Rahul. We'll come back to unpacking your story a little bit, but I want to go to Umair as well, because so one thing we were talking offline about was the kind of, not similarity, but there's a lot of things that you will find in parallel between his protagonist Neil and his protagonist Kabir. Um, and I had forewarned you that I'm going to ask you to unpack the name Kabir, who's a Kashmiri Pandit. So, but let's hear your passage if you want to read something, and then we'll ask you.
Okay. So before I begin with the passage, this becomes a very difficult question to any author when it is posed. What is your book all about? The book, I mean, it comes as a hesitation for me. What is it that I should answer? But for a place like Kashmir, it is better understood with poems and metaphors. And I remember Hazrat Amir Khusro saying once, Gar ruye zami ast, hami ast, hami ast, hami ast. Years later, Allama Iqbal said, आज वो कश्मीर है, मखूम व मजबूर व फ़कीर, कल जिसे अहले नज़र कहते थे, ईरान सगीर. Moving on, I have two lines of my own to define Kashmir. It's more like a survival instinct, what I feel, is Zindagi chinar si, khiza bhi, bahar bhi. Chinar is a maple tree, and it's changing shades in the month of spring and autumn. When somebody visits Srinagar, you would see the river Jhelum cutting throughout the heart of the city. And to both sides, there is this bridge which is called as Kadal. So there are various Kadals, Habba Kadal, Amira Kadal, and so on. This book is an attempt to make those bridges in between Kashmir and rest of India. That is all what my book is all about. And going back to my engineering days, I had students coming from, both Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh. And to my surprise, with so much of conflict, we had the Pandits and the Muslims speaking in the fluent Kashmiri in such a way as if it felt they were the long-lost brothers and sisters. So that always left me with the curiosity. What is this conflict all about when you speak in, such a brotherhood here? And then I describe it as a term when I sat with them and I tried to understand their version of what the conflict meant to them. I felt there is this emotional constipation with both of them. And
Can you explain that? What do you mean by that?
Emotional constipation, see, I would not like to define what constipation is. We all understand what it is. Emotional constipation would be to be stuck in a certain dark corner of your heart which you don't want to release. More than Kabir, the protagonist, I think it is Iravati, the protagonist's mother, which is very close to my heart. And there is this emotional constipation going on with her from the days of Exodus. And there's a passage that I'd like to read. It is exactly in this passage we understand what emotional constipation is. In the dimly lit room, Kaval sat beside Iravati, their faces reflecting their shared burdens. A somber atmosphere enveloped them as they contemplated their roles, their struggles with Kabir, and the desperate need to reach to him. Iravati smiled and said, "Before I got married to Purushottam, I lived in Handwara. Tarannum was my next door neighbor. When we went to school, we often saw a very charismatic fakir roaming in the village with his dafli singing religious songs. Children used to line up, looking at the fakir with fascination. During Ramadan, he would wander all around the city, calling out to household to wake up for sehri, the pre-dawn meal. He was treated respectfully by everyone in town. One day, as the fakir slept under a tree, a mad dog bit him. In those days, Dog bites, especially from mad dogs, were untreatable. The fakir's health deteriorated and he began behaving erratically. He would laugh out aloud, make strange faces, and walk in a peculiar manner. Children started making fun of him and tied a rope of tin cans around him, further irritating and infuriating him. He would crawl on the streets and maintain little hygiene. The villagers became worried and searched for the dog that had bit him. They found the dog dead and they assumed that the fakir would die a miserable death. To make it easier for him, they tied him with a rope. No children were allowed to witness what was about to happen. But Tarannum and I quickly sneaked into the nearby wood to witness the scene in secret. A white long dupatta was dipped in the ice-cold water of the nearby stream and spread over his body, covering him from head to toe. Within minutes, Fakir Gul's troubled soul found tranquility. A tear slipped down Iravati's cheek as she recounted the story. Kaval's breath caught, her mind grasping the significance of the villagers' act. But what they didn't know was that the dog that bit him carried a dreadful disease, rabies. Kaval interjected her voice, filled with somber realization. People with rabies develop a fear of water due to the painful condition known as hydrophobia. Water, which is supposed to bring comfort and relief, becomes their source of torment. Kaval, that story mirrors my own journey, Iravati revealed, her voice filled with vulnerability. For so long, I was trapped in an escapist mentality, avoiding my fears and denying myself true liberation. It took time for that awakening to confront my past and embrace my fears.
Thank you.
So, you know, Shashi,
Yeah.
if I may add to what Umair said, and, this assessment is absolutely correct. I think multiple generations of Kashmiris are stuck in many ways. We have these events stuck in our head and we cannot seem to escape those events. Depending on who you are, the Kashmiri Pandits have their own events and the Kashmiri Muslims have their own events. And both of them are absolutely true. Now, for many years, I have said to myself that I do not feel any emotional affinity towards Kashmir. I have kind of tried to withdraw myself from Kashmir. And in many ways, it's true because, the Kashmir we grew up is not the Kashmir I visit as a journalist. From 98 onwards, I have regularly visited Kashmir as a reporter. But the only time I went to my erstwhile house, which was in Srinagar, was in 2007 when I was researching my memoir. And I also wanted to click a few pictures for my parents who have never gone back after 1990. Now, when I went to that house, I immediately regretted that decision. And I did click some pictures, but I did not show them to my father. Because in my head, there was a certain idea of that home, which when I went, the complete picture had changed. For example, on the first floor, I remember, we had this little room where we used to keep, there was a shelf full of books. My father's sister used to read in Hindi. She used to read these literary classics. So I remember there was Fanishwarnath Renu's Julus and complete works of Swami Vivekananda, Arabian Nights. There was Gandhiji's the story of my experiments with truth. Now in my imagination that room still existed, and when I asked the new occupants of the house, I requested them to show me that room, and they took me there. The room had completely changed. The shelf had it was a vegetable shelf now. It had vegetables in that particular shelf. So the idea had completely changed. But I think now, the newer generation, people youngsters who are in their early 20s and who've never seen a Kashmiri Pandit in their life, or they've not seen the turmoil of 90. Because we must also remember that a lot of things happened in Kashmir Valley also after the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits. So the Kashmiris also, the Kashmiri Muslims also went through a certain dark period. But the youngsters, I think, there's a little hope because they do not carry that baggage and fatigue which, many of us carry. I was telling Umair, and I think Mehak was here. Mehak has written a book on Kashmir, and I said that Kashmir now needs to be seen with a fresh set of eyes. And I hope when it is seen with that fresh set of eyes, the baggage or what Umair was saying, is gets exhausted by that time.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you draw yourself more and more away from the Kashmiri, the locus of Kashmir, that your protagonist basically is largely in, like Bastar, for example. One thing I notice in your book is that you can take a journalist and make him a fiction author, but you can't, I mean, the trace of a journalist follows him right through the book, right? Like, we could, I mean, if I didn't know you or didn't know that you were a conflict journalist, I could still tell that you are a narrator a lot, like the way that you describe Bastar itself, like the way that it is actually described. How much of the journey have you straddled in terms of from your book in 2014, for example, which is all these non-fiction books, 4 of them, and now what does fiction bring to you that non-fiction? I mean, why fiction is my real question, but you might want to shed some light on like what it has brought you that you couldn't. Part of that answer, of course, you've already said before that you untold stories, etc. But anything else?
I think when you were young, when I started going to conflict zones, the first time I went to conflict zone was in 1998, not very far from here, 3-4 hours journey from here, when the two erstwhile Maoist parties, the People's War Group and the Party Unity, were coming together in a merger of sorts in 98, and there was a big event which happened in the jungles of Warangal, and I went to witness that for the first time. Now, from that age onwards till recently, you're running aimlessly from one place to another, and you are getting these experiences, and you're trying to make sense of those experiences for others, for your readers, for your audience. There was a time in my life, and it was a pretty long time, when I was living out of my suitcase. So there's a particular term in Kashmiri I used in this book. It's called Paidra, which means feet always hitting the ground, which was true in my case because my father used to get really tired of it. He would at some point in time say, you started treating this house as a hotel. You come with one bag of clothes and you take another bag of clothes and you're leaving. But such was the, because I was also very curious. I mean, I didn't have to travel so much. But I was really curious about what I was witnessing in those areas. But after a point in time, I think it happens by virtue of age and by virtue of little wisdom. Once your reading, once your understanding of the world reaches a certain level, where you also try and make sense of things you have witnessed in the last 20 to 25 years to yourself. I think this book is an aim to do that, to make sense of what I've seen in the last 2 decades, 2.5 decades, to myself. And I'll just end. Many years ago, I was traveling from a district called Bhadradari Kutagudam in Telangana towards Chhattisgarh, and there was this little new fresh tarmac road which had been laid And the vehicle, the driver was, he was driving it very fast. I was sitting next to him. And while I was driving, I saw this small group of Adivasi women sitting on their haunches in the middle of this tarmac road. And I was like, why are they sitting in the middle of this road? Why can't they sit on the, on the periphery of this road, on the margins? Now, I asked this question to driver, I asked this question to myself, no answer was forthcoming. Several years later, I was in a place called Abujmar in Chhattisgarh, which is like, back or beyond. And I was having a conversation next to a very angry river with this senior Maoist commander who is no more, he's dead. He was from this area. And I don't know, we're having a conversation. And suddenly that incident came to my mind. He said something really moving, touching, and it made sense to me. He said, that tarmac road has not impinged upon the idea of home for that Adivasi. For that jungle, for that group of Adivasi women is home. So just because you built a tarmac road has not tarnished or impinged upon their idea of home. I thought that was a rather moving explanation of it, and of course it's gone into my book.
Also, the word you used, margins, kind of defines the metaphor that you are trying to portray through that story. One last question to Umair, and then we will throw this open to the audience. So your journey as, you've been an RJ, you basically been a cultural communicator of sorts, because you are an RJ, you also a scriptwriter, and of course you are going to be a Netflix man now, looks like. So how's it been to bring out a book in the middle of so much audio visual going on for you? What has been the thing that drove you to write something like in print or whatever?
So this was almost like a childhood ritual that I used to do. Every time I visited Srinagar, I went to an area called as Habba Kadal. Now, Habba Kadal was a densely populated Kashmiri Pandit area. Every time I went there, of course, to buy dry fruits for a lot of relatives who requested, and saffron. Taking a left turn from the lane, there was the bridge. Standing on the bridge, I could see the abandoned Kashmiri Pandit houses, decaying, crumbling. And there was one house I often felt telling me to write about. And I have been observing that house almost for good 15, 16 years. And then one fine day after COVID, I felt there is this compulsion in me to write something about that house. And that is how that story shaped up. And with the seasons of Kashmir, the maple tree, if you look at it, it is recycling itself in all the season. That is also the philosophy of every Kashmiri, I feel, and for all of us. If you look at the trees, if you look at the leaf of it, it blooms in the spring, turns bronze in the autumn, and falls down in the extreme winter. The extreme winter period is known as the Chilai Kalan, which is the bone-chilling period in Kashmir for 40 days. What Kashmiris are doing in this period is they are seeking solace in the home. Every Kashmiri would want to retire in the warmest room of the house, which is the kitchen, lighting up a bukhari or a kangdi, having a noon chai or a kahwa in the hand, and resting their head on the wall. And that kind of peace, I think, is carried out or is taken by every Kashmiri living inside or outside of Kashmir. So with this, I end my remarks on Kashmir and my book. Thank you so much for having me here, and I hope you read the book and give me a feedback. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. I mean, I know that we've constantly tried to get away from Kashmir, but it looks like it is the binding force, and we have to keep returning to it. May I seek some questions or comments from the audience, please? Oh, surely you have some. Yes, gentlemen, first row.
Hello. Yeah. Thanks for the talk. And I would just start from my master's days. So I did master's in political science from University of Delhi. There I had a course on Kashmir and all. And first time there I was introduced with Rahul Pandita's book and Moon Clouds on and things. So I just gave the background. So I'm a little bit familiar with that gaze and discourse, every kind of discourse. So my question is about the honesty. As you just started discussing about honesty, and you write things about honest and all. That is like still like it feels me a little bit discomfortable. Ki what do you mean by honesty and all? So and Rahul talks about like with the strength, you write about the vulnerability, and I don't know, like I also like try to write something about the people, those who are margins, about my own experience, and about sometimes my own vulnerability and people's vulnerability. But I don't feel like a strength from what do you mean by a strength, and when you will be in the vulnerable position, when you are writing something, then who are going to support you? And even though my own community is in like vulnerable, so how bring a strength and something like that? And second thing is that, as you said that fiction, non-fiction, so I came across the non-fiction thing, because in pol science and all, we only talks about the other thing, which is so real and real.
Sorry to rush you. I mean, I've already been indicated that we've got to wind down in 5 minutes. So if you can just...
I'm just lasting here.
I'm not sure I understand your question,
thanks.
but I'll try and answer it to the best of my ability. Sometimes when you're in the thick of a particular event, it also leaves a mark on you, right? And that mark can be quite unsettling. So personally, I found it very helpful. Of course, journalists don't have that option. Journalists are in the thick of things, and they have to write it as things are happening. But as far as larger things like books, etc., are concerned, I think I've personally found it helpful to have a little distance between the event and the time I'm writing that event, where kind of things settle in your head, and then you're revisiting those things. So when you are doing that, that is what I meant by writing about. The dangers and the unsettling of those events is not going to change. The events are what they are, but the way you are experiencing them from the advantage of a distance, where you are more, let's say, more stoic about it. I have personally found it very helpful as a writer.
One question, one hand was raised there. Yeah, please.
Thank you for the talk here. My work has been on Bastar. I write and research on Bastar. But my question is to both of you who are writing about conflict zones. So how do you write about trauma of someone you've been engaged and dealing with for several years, with the trauma that you have yourself experienced in some ways? But at the same time, writing about conflict for over decades, and you don't see sometimes, there's no way forward. How do you deal with that kind of despair when you write either fiction or in journalistic writing? Thank you.
Again, personally speaking, I think, though it's not an essential pre-requirement of it, but I think my own personal history of exile from Kashmir has sometimes I feel that it makes me more empathetic towards the lives and situation of people who might find themselves in similar situations because of other conflicts. I found that really helpful. The other thing is that, I've tried to do conflict journalism in a slightly different way, which is that, I speak to young journalism students sometimes, or even young researchers. They have this really romantic notion about conflicts. Young journalists, for example, they now, especially in this time and age, they think they'll be embedded with a squad of Maoist guerrillas, and, they'll get to click a couple of pictures and, they will go. Sometimes journalists are also parachuted into, from Delhi, where, they have this particular top-down approach. They go to Chinta Gufa and, where a particular encounter or ambush has happened, and they write and they try to get what the editors largely call the color and quote of the story, which means, you speak to this Adivasi, you get this quote and you get the hell out of there. Long time back, I had invented a word for it. I called it the clean bedsheet journalism, which means that, even when you are going inside, you always find, you want to give yourself the luxury of returning to the nearest town where you'll get to sleep in a semi-decent hotel. But in my experiences, I always tell them that conflict reporting is not about getting this particular selfie clicked with a band of guerrillas or writing about what happened on that particular day. Conflict reporting, most of the times, is knowing what happened, say, 7 days ago, or 7 months ago, or 70 years ago. That is the perspective you need. Number two, and I'll just end this because, time is short. I've always also, it's a very simple thing, but I also found that reporters usually don't have the patience to listen. And it takes, in my experience, when you go to a particular place where people have seen so much, their heart, their chests are brimming with things to say. And as a listener, you only need to tip that, and the water will come flowing in. But in order to tip that, you need to have a lot of patience. Again, most of my examples are from Bastar, but it's true of most areas. I was traveling with a Maoist guerrilla called Samaya many, many years ago. And Samaya had this strange habit, you would say, Samaya, aaj 4 baje tak pahunch jayenge, he would say, ho. You say, kal subah pahunchenge, he would say, ho. Nahi pahunchenge, ho. To everything, he would say, ho. It's after like 15 days, he kind of became comfortable with you to tell the story of his own self and his people, and then you realize what has happened around it. So attention and patience to things, and the lack of this top-down approach, because journalists go and they think, they use a resource person and they think, this resource person, a resource person could be a local journalist or a stringer or a local NGO person. Sometimes we use it. And we go back and we completely forget about him. He's not even a part of our byline.
Yeah.
I have personally tried to have a little ethics about it and not do that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Look, we are told that we are out of time. The red flag, I love the colors. They said it's 0 minutes, so I have to end. I'm so sorry. There was a question here that we missed. Can we please take it offline? And I know there was another question there. We have to take it offline. But thank you very much for being such a lovely audience. And thanks to the organizers for giving us this opportunity on behalf of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shashidhar, Umair, and Rahul, for such an engaging conversation. Books are available. Rahul's book is available at the book point. I believe Umair's book, is yet to be released. Yes, is yet to be released. So, however, based on the conversations and readings, we have had, I would strongly recommend, to go and read this book. Such an evocative book. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience.